Hello folks, this show was recorded at the weekend before we saw the reaction online to James Tavernier, Connor Goldson and Joe Aribo's Instagram and social media posts and the club's statement on racial equality which came out on Monday morning. Now, we would just like to reiterate that here at Heart and Hand we 100% support the players, we support anyone in their campaign for racial equality. We did discuss the matter in a great deal more depth over on our Patreon site. If you go to the daily update for Monday the 20th of July over on our Patreon site, it's free. You don't need to be a subscriber. If you want to hear where I spoke to one of our podders, Tess, who is mixed race and obviously had plenty to say about what had happened over the last few days, you'll be able to hear that show for free over there. It's patreon.com/heart and hand. That's patreon.com/heart and hand. But once again, we'd just like to reiterate our support for the players and agree with the club that Ibrox should be a place for everyone, regardless of colour, creed or background. Hello everyone, we're back, yes, after our summer hiatus. Heart and Hand flagship podcast returns to the airwaves. I am delighted to start off with a landmark show in 2020 because we are here today to discuss Rangers' fabulous triumph in France, of course. We'll do that later. But first up, I want to talk about the first ever Heart and Hand book. Yes, it is here. The 50 greatest Rangers games voted on and ranked by the Heart and Hand universe. And joining me to discuss it, well, who better than its author, Mr. Martyn Ramsay. Hello, Martyn. How are you doing?
Hi, David. Very well. Thanks for having me on.
Now, the last I saw, you were top 3 on the Amazon chart. So it's going pretty well.
It's been a good start. The pre-sale was a lot bigger than I imagined. So, it's been all a bit surreal after all that work. And then you leave it, obviously, for months and you hand it over to the publishers and it kind of goes out the mind a wee bit. And then, it is back on and then suddenly you've got boxes and boxes of these things in your hand that it's taken up quite a fair bit of the last year. So, it's exciting, though.
It really is. And, I've been through the process with you. I've been able to read the book as it was coming together, but there was still nothing like having that finished article in my hand and being able to go through it. It's an excellently written book. I would say that, given Martin's my mate anyway, but I can say it genuinely in this case. It is good. So I'm being quite honest and upfront there, as people will see. Buy the book, and if you don't like it, then it's your fault. But Martyn, let's first of all start with the concept of the book. The 50 greatest Rangers games. What started that ball rolling for you?
Well, the pods, really, as everything originates on this network. 2018, we did a series of podcasts on the 50 greatest Rangers goals, where we invited the listeners to vote. Their top 10. Number 1 got 10 points, number 10 got 1, everything else in between. And those were out at Christmas 18, and they were very well received. A lot of fun to do. You were on those shows. So I knew I was going to do it again in 2019, and I knew it was going to be greatest games this time. And I wondered, because I'd done so much work on the time capsule for so many of the games that were likely to be voted for, so many notes, and it's obviously spoken to fans, yourself and a lot of the other guys on the podcast, of course. I just wondered, would there be a book in this? Would there be something bigger than the scope of the shows that we could do at Christmas time? And maybe it would give me a chance to just write a wee bit more about why, or try to understand why Rangers fans have voted in the way that they did. Why some games have resonance and others none at all, kind of thing. I sent that proposal off to the first publisher I could find that would kind of specialise in that type of book, and they were very keen. So it was pretty much all go from the first idea.
Now, on the cover, you've chosen a very specific image, and it was the one that you wanted very much so. Tell listeners first of all what it is, and also why that one struck such a chord.
Oh, the images of Peter Lovenkrands' celebration, the 2002 Cup final, from the back. I'd obviously toyed with ideas about the cover. Naturally, you're looking at a collage probably, and then you found out that it's like £300-400 per image. Use that in the front cover, and money could probably be better spent elsewhere, and having 2 or 3 doesn't really quite do it. So then I was looking for, well, is there one that really sums this up? And I don't remember seeing this at the time. I've no idea how I missed it. But it's a fantastic photograph for a start. And I thought it just encapsulated everything. That's greatness there for us. This young player, still, obviously kind of finding his feet at the club. The most famous number in football on his back, number 9, finishes a cup final there and then, a great cup final, a genuinely end-to-end cup final, with lots of goals and incident, and the faces that are looking back at him, of us, we aren't in it, but they are us. It's what we'd be doing. And these people hugging and obviously celebrating and giving something back to Lovenkrands. I think there's a woman blowing him a kiss back as he's blowing it to them. Strangers, but for that second, best friends. And that's what it's all about. It's what spending months in the freezing winter, traipsing up and down the country to shithole grounds, getting frustrated, because you'll maybe get a spring afternoon like that. And that's it. That's the moment.
No, it's a wonderful image, and it does set the tone particularly well, because this book is a fan's book. It's been voted for by the fans. It contains contributions from supporters. It's about us as much as it is about these amazing games, and it is about the wonderful players and the history of our club and whatnot. But it does come, it's almost your love letter to being a Rangers supporter.
Yeah, I try to cover as many bases as I wanted to. Some of those chapters are quite personal to me, and I think that comes through. But all the way through, I would, well, the time capsule does, it is about the guest, really, maybe more than the actual game itself, because I've always loved hearing older Bears talking about matches and moments and their experience of that. It's always just kind of interested me. So I needed to capture that, and it is our story. It is a fan story. It was the fans who voted for it, so it couldn't just have been 50 match reports. We could have gone to the record and asked permission for those and just bound them up. It isn't just about who scored and who was sent off and how many were there. It is about these experiences that we can all share, we can all relate to, and yeah, that's what I wanted to get through. You were kind enough to write one of the forewords, and Richard Gough was as well, and I was keen that I would have two of those, because it is as much about Rangers fans and what they love and why they love what they love, as much as it is about what happened on the field of play.
How did the system work in terms of how did you arrive at the top 50? Were people asked to submit 50 or how did it work?
Asked to submit the top 10 in the month of May 2019, so at the end of last season. And as I said, the number one got 10 points and all the way down to number 10 getting 1 point, and into the spreadsheet it went. Over 170 games, I think, were chosen. And it was interesting seeing that kind of take shape as days in the weeks of May went on. Clear favourites and clear leaders taking shape. But you've read it. Part of it is trying to understand why the ones that missed out, and why they didn't quite resonate as strongly as some might like, because there are a few big games that aren't in there. But then it's difficult. Rangers have been involved in a lot of very successful, a lot of great afternoons, and I get that was really part of the interest.
Now you speak in the book about that very thing, which is that there are certain matches that don't make it that you were very surprised at, but also the corollary to that is that there are matches in there that you were very surprised to see yourself in. And what I found interesting about the book was that you didn't really shy away from this. You didn't say everything that's here is absolutely correct and justifiable. It is, after all, a vote. It is, after all, an opinion thing. But you would say this game's resonance is probably because of X or Y, but equally try to place it in a bigger context.
Yeah. It's not definitive, and I think I open my first line in the introduction is that I hope that the book's out of date by the time you pick it up, that these things change, and we've had other things, other great moments to move into that kind of level, that kind of ranking. So it was never a fact. It's never a matter of fact, and this is this definitive 50. It's a historical document, I think, in and of itself, in that it tells future generations, I guess, what Rangers fans thought in that month of May 2019. But I was very keen that when writing about it, it couldn't just be about the nuts and bolts of a game. I was trying to understand why this is here and why it's not higher, why this is maybe quite low in the 50. So it would be an assessment of that, and trying to analyse, why things are where they are, why people have voted the way they did, because it is of genuine interest. What is a great Rangers game? The two of us would have different opinions on that. So it gave plenty of scope to get into maybe some wider themes, which was enjoyable.
In terms of then, if you like, almost criteria, and I submitted my 10, I sat down and I thought, right, shortlist, and the shortlist was like 25, and the next day it was 37. And then I had to think about criteria, and for me, I thought, well, did I have to have been there? Did it have to be in my lifetime? Can I pick games? I wasn't that. Can I pick games I haven't seen? Because obviously, 1872, I wasn't around back then. There's no footage of it. Did it have to be a trophy? We're one of the few clubs that you can pick a top 100 where there's a trophy handed to you at the end of it. And all of that combined to make you realise this is not easy. No,
it's not. And many of the emails that I got in, especially ones near the end of the month, were of people saying, this has been the hardest thing I've ever had to do. You've made my month a misery, try to rank these things. But again, that's what made it fun. That's what makes it interesting. This is Rangers. Does a trophy need to be there? The answer probably yes, given how the top 10, the top 20 start to shape. Where the Old Firm games rank compared to proving ourselves in a European stage. does the other team's part have to play anything in it? Does it have to be a great, ostensibly, aesthetically great football match that we just happen to, come out on top, or do we just want to see Rangers being dominant? And you're right when you talk about games that have predated us, but that's exactly what greatness is. It's exactly why we're still talking about games that we weren't alive at the time they were played, because that's what greatness does. It resonates. It continues. People want to keep talking about them. But we all had our different criteria, I think it's fair to say.
Did you notice any particular era bias?
Yeah, I mean, recency bias was always, and it always is with these things. That's just the nature of it. Things are fresh. The quality of the footage is better. So even when people are trying to maybe reassess. So yeah, some big eras, some big famous names don't feature well at all. The great Rangers team of the early 60s, for example, they're in once and it's a defeat. Bill Struth is in it once. And that's the 1928 Cup final, not his team of the 40s and early 50s. And that, it's interesting to start, but I think it's quite alarming. It's quite alarming that Ali McCoist, the manager, features as often as Jock Wallace does, and as often as Struth and Simon combine. But that shows us that the emotion around 2012 is still very acute and still very resonant. But it, for me anyway, set big alarm bells about how we do history, really, and how good we are at keeping these moments and these names and these stories alive. And it's something, as we approach 2022 and the big 150, that I know the club are looking at, but it really, it has to be something, I think, more pressing in the mind, especially these fan accounts. There should be a vast bank of oral history. There are people out there that can still remember Struth's team. We should want to hear about that, and we should want to capture that in an audio sense. It becomes more real then. So yeah, you have that recency bias. The 9-0 era being a good example of that. 14 games from the 9-0 era in the 50. I think that's probably about right. That seems an understandable figure. But half of those came in almost the last calendar year of it, April 96 to May 97. Wow. And it's, as time goes on, and that era that we grew up with, David, obviously goes further back, I think there's a need or just a tendency to want to just distill and distill and distill, so that at some stage, 9-0, yeah, Gorham, Gascoigne, Laudrup, because those were the three figures that were very dominant, very significant in finishing that whole thing. And I think there's a real danger that we forget about the base of it, and those earlier teams, and those earlier players, and even the earlier manager. I mean, Souness features 8 times, possibly a wee bit smaller than I maybe imagined, but none in the top 10. 3 times in the top 20. And so it's interesting that the man who kick-started that revival, and he's still very visible. He's on our tellies all the time, and he's not shy in proclaiming his love for the club. It's strange that those games just aren't resonating as much as I think they should. So perhaps there's a bit of work that needs to be done in just ensuring that whole era, even 86 to 98 really, is just a wee bit more thorough, because I think we're losing some moments there.
Okay, where can they pick this fine work up?
It's available on the Heart and Hand website, heartandhand.co.uk. You go into the shop and it's there. It's available on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle if you so wish. I think it's on the Watsons website. I think they're still picking back up after just reopening after COVID. So it's out and about should you want it. And if you do buy a copy, if you have done and you have enjoyed it, please don't be shy about telling people. We don't have a huge advertising budget here. Very much relying on word of mouth. But if you have enjoyed it, tell people, please. That would be great. And if you haven't, you're free to do that as well. I'm happy to discuss why you didn't. But yeah, I'm proud of it. I think it's a good book. It's an interesting project. Interesting to maybe revisit it in 5-10 years and
Definitely.
see what's changed, and not just in terms of new games, but if there's been a fashion for some of those older ones coming back in. So yeah, and it covers the whole scope. 1872 is in there, and it's in the top half. So recency bias only goes so far, and I think that's a perfect example of the power of guys doing history well. Because if this poll was conducted 15, 16 years ago, I don't think it would certainly not be in the top half of the 50. I'm not sure it would make the 50. But that's Gary Ralston's work, and it's Ian and Gordon on the Founders Trail, just making this story visceral and bringing it back to life. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Highly recommended, this book. As the Bible salesman said, if you want a good book, this is a really good book. So get your hands on a copy today. Now, two matches which are unlikely to feature in a Greatest Rangers, the top 50 of all time, took place over the weekend, but were nonetheless very enjoyable. Rangers headed off to Lyon to play in the Veolia Trophy, and in fact came home with the Veolia Trophy after a 2-0 victory over Lyon on Thursday night. Was followed up by a 2-0 victory over Nice on Saturday evening. Two very good performances, I have to say, from Rangers. Martyn, it's a pre-season tournament, and it's very much about getting game time into the players' legs. But everybody got a game. Everybody got some minutes. We played some good football in patches. But the thing that probably stood out to me the most was the fitness levels. I was quite pleasantly impressed with them.
Yeah, compared to the competitive football that we've been watching from other countries and the kind of sluggish restart. I think you're right, a lot of energy there, which is all this is for, really, isn't it? It's really just fine retuning and getting ready for 1st of August. So I'm not so sure fitness was ever a huge concern during the last few years. They seem to do the right kind of work. Injuries might be, but just general fitness of the players and their ability to keep the motor going has been a part of that kind of Gerrard project. And listen, you'd rather Rangers win than not win, obviously. And it's nice to see where that can maybe take them. But I'm loath to read too much into any pre-season action. It's a whole different ballgame from the hurdles we have fallen at, and we know we'll need to be able to find a plan around if we're to get back to where we want, and you probably aren't provided that challenge by Lyon and Nice. Interestingly,
the manager, when he spoke out after it, was speaking about some of the young players that came in and did well, I thought, over there. Nathan Patterson, Lewis Mayo, fantastic challenge in the Lyon game where Rangers were actually, due to injuries and Ryan Kent's red card, down to 9 men up against a strong and quite fresh Lyon team, because they brought on a lot of substitutes. They were up against Depay and Dembele, good players. Bit of siege defending to be done. It was the whole attackers versus defenders thing. But the young lads stood up to it well. They'll develop for that experience, I think. But when asked about youngsters coming through, he seemed to issue a rather clear warning about reports of ego within the development squad, and that those players who refuse to commit to the club and who display signs of ego won't be making it through to the first team portal, whereas guys like Patterson, Mayo, etc. deserve their spot because they haven't shown that. It was an interesting comment, clearly aimed at specifically people. The speculation is that it's Kai Kennedy. Would be unfair to say that it definitely is. We don't know, but certainly that's the suspicion. What did you make of that, Martyn?
He loves a pointed barb, doesn't he? The Lafferty signing and subsequent probably speaks to the reputation he had as a player, Gerrard, as someone who just could not abide a bad attitude. Can't stand it. I can't imagine many things frustrating him more than players not busting every vessel in the body to try and make themselves better. And I think if there's a hint of being ahead of yourself before you've done anything, you're just, you're done. And it's the right attitude to take. It's the right standard to set. Possibly overplaying it for the benefit of some of the other lads there, just as a warning shot as well. That these are the standards. But even as a pundit, Davey, just after he finished playing, it was something he would love speaking about. Just the effort and hard work that he felt he had to put in. And there are stories at Liverpool about those who if they didn't show that, were told about it in no uncertain terms. I'm sure.
It's the story as old as a hill, isn't it? A young kid, head turned, thinks he's made it, gets to walk about saying he's a Rangers player. Well, you're not yet. Get into the team, do something, and you're a Rangers player. But I know I was an arsehole when I was 17, so I can't really criticise. I thought it was the most important thing in the whole world. So there will be youngsters at every club in the world who don't make it, and I'm sure when they're 35, turn round and go, I could have done this, I could have done that. And I hope that the players concerned actually take that warning, because you're a long time retired and you'll never get another opportunity as big as the one that you currently have. So 2 more friendlies to play, Martyn. An unusual one for us in that we're playing a public friendly against another SPFL team. We're playing against Motherwell at Ibrox on Wednesday night, before taking on Coventry City, maybe a more traditional friendly at Ibrox on the Saturday. A few eyebrows raised about the Motherwell friendly. For me, I think we do have to remember we are in the middle of a pandemic. It has limited travel options for a kick-off, and that while we may be slapdash in the middle of pre-season, a lot of leagues aren't.
Absolutely. No, there's nothing much more to say than that. It's just a kind of common sense approach. It's one of the only interesting things about pre-season friendlies is usually the chance to see teams that you very rarely see Rangers playing. This kind of weird and wonderful array of teams that we've faced over the years. But no, it's very much a needs must. And going back to my earlier point, it's probably out of the 4 of them, probably the most appropriate kind of test that we need to face and we need to prepare for, because Motherwell are brutal.
Yeah, they'll get in our faces, and you're right. I mean, I think one of the things at the weekend was that we know Rangers are a good European team. Absolutely. We know that Rangers have devastating pace on the break. The problem often comes when we're playing against sides who'll never be far enough up the park to allow us to break. That they're not going to play that way. They're going to sit men behind the ball. So I think in a completely different way. And yes, it's almost counterintuitive to say that you might get a little bit more out of a game against Motherwell than you will against the game against Leon. But in terms of our domestic campaign, it's probably true. Now, as we head into this new season, folks, big announcement for you flagship listeners, and that is that this season, Heart and Hand, for the home game certainly, will be at the stadium involved in the press area this year. We have been given a press pass. Not something I've always been keen on, to be honest, but after talking it over with the podders, after talking it over with some of the subscribers over on our Heart and Hand Patreon site, it was felt that we should do this to offer something alternative. So for subscribers moving forward, you will get a podcast round about 2 o'clock. If it's a 3 o'clock kickoff, you get my point. But a podcast about an hour before Christmas. A podcast about an hour before kickoff. Don't know where that came from. Where we'll talk about the team. It'll be myself and Stevie Clifford from Four Lads Had a Dream. We'll talk about the team, the lineup, what we're expecting. There'll be a half-time report, and then a podcast immediately afterwards that will feature quotes from the manager and from any players who have conducted interviews. You'll still, of course, get our traditional post-match car pod once fans are back, but before that, a traditional podders pod, if you like, followed up by our late evening pod where we get the thoughts of all the listeners involved. So loads of great coverage coming up on Heart and Hand this season. To sign up, just go to patreon.com. It's patreon.com/heart and hand. No ampersand. I hate ampersands. And sign up for just $1.99 per month. You'll get some spectacular coverage going forward. And I hope you enjoy that. Right. Just time in to thank our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and to thank my guest today, the splendid Mr. Martyn Ramsay.
Thanks for having me, David. Pleasure.
We'll be back next Monday with a roundup of all of the fixtures. Until then, have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.